Tonight it is my pleasure to introduce Benjamin Anastas. Mr. Anastas is the author of An Underachiever's Diary and The Faithful Narrative of a Pastor's Disappearance, which was a New York Times notable book for 2001. Most recently, his memoir, Too Good to Be True, was published in October of last year by New Harvest and hailed by Amy Baradell of Book Forum as a book that should be required reading for all creative writing MFA students. His work has also appeared in the Paris Review, Harper's, the New York Times Magazine, Book Forum, the Yale Review, and the Best American Essays 2012. He is a visiting faculty member at Bennington College as well as a member of the core faculty of the Bennington Writing Seminars. Please welcome Benjamin Anastas.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you all for coming here tonight to hear me read. Is this microphone on and do I need to move it closer? Can people hear me? I have a mumbling problem. I've just been in the car for like 4 hours or something ridiculous like that. So I'm going to have to be extra conscious to, project. So I'm going to read from my memoir, Too Good to Be True, which came out in October. I think one of the reasons why Amy Baradell said in her very kind review that it should be required reading for MFA students is because sort of the backstory is about the things that writers never really tell you when you're younger and you're just starting out, which is just sort of everyone kind of emphasizes how much work you have to do to publish, which is true. But nobody really talks about what happens after you publish and how publishing your first book for 99.9% of writers doesn't really change your life all that much, other than making some things easier, like publishing a story here, writing reviews, or getting a teaching job. But as a lot of these things that writers do to support themselves become much more competitive, like everything, like applying to college or like trying to get your kid into kindergarten in my Brooklyn neighborhood. It's just like it's this fierce competition for scarce resources. So part of what this book is about is having achieved this thing that I always wanted to do, which is becoming a writer. I used to go into, like a lot of young writers, I used to go into bookstores and look at all these books in the shelves and just think, my God, what transformation will have to occur for me to actually, be one of them. It just seemed like I have to become a different person. Like there are all these special people who have books on the shelves, and I'm just a guy who likes to read. But so the transformation takes place, over years and years of working hard and tearing things up and facing rejection and doing all the things you have to do as a young writer. But then the book goes up there, and you're kind of back to square one. So the book's a little bit about that. It's also about debt and being broke. I really, when I started writing this book, I thought, like, how can I actually have anybody, how can I write about how broke I am? Like, how could I even do that? Because this is like, nobody ever talks about it, No one ever talks about money, really. So I think it's become kind of the last taboo. I think it's much more, everyone talks about sex and writes about sex, and it doesn't matter, like, sex with between humans and plants, humans and animals, just like, and it really, there's no taboo anymore. But money, I think, is really kind of the last taboo. So, so I write openly about money, and about the end of my marriage, and the birth of my son. So those are sort of the basic things. I'm going to stop rambling and read. But I'm going to time myself, though. So I'm going to turn this clock on. Oh, excuse me. I had such plans for the afternoon. I was going to get here, I was going to check into the place where I'm staying. I was going to put on my gym clothes and go for a run. And I just spent the entire afternoon on the road. Staring at the back of trucks. But I am happy to be here with you all. All right, so I'm going to read the opening of the book, which is called At the Church Door. It took a long time for me to admit that I had failed. Even as I write this, I can feel the old machinery kicking in and sputtering, "Yeah, but you still have time," or "Don't worry, things will turn around," or that old dependable excuse trotted out by the teenager in all of us, "The world just doesn't understand me." But I've stopped listening to my own excuses. I have reached the point in life where I no longer accept false hopes, the palliative care of counterfeit wisdom. Part of this is courage. Even more is necessity. When you have failed like I have, that is, when you've watched all of your best-laid plans, one by one, fly off on their own like crazed songbirds, and peel off in long, lovely arcs into the nearest picture window, then you'll understand how I ended up, one raw autumn day not too long ago, standing outside a church in Brooklyn, with my hands pressed against the doors so I could pray. In broad daylight, arms spread like I was being frisked from behind, head bowed and murmuring pleas for help to a divine power I wasn't even sure that I believed in. A stalled career would be enough to get you there. I had that. A failed marriage. I had one of those too. The story of its undoing was so high drama that I should have been a sultry Argentine in a terry cloth robe, pacing my penthouse and arguing with a pre-op transsexual starlet on my product-placed mobile. The will to go on. It's not that I had lost it. No, I have never lost that, and I hope I never do. But everything I had worked for was vanishing, and my losses were mounting, and I was in need. I was in need. It's that simple. So I found myself at the doors of the church nearest to where I live with my hands pressed against the cold exterior, asking, "Lord, I need your help. Show me a way out of this," while a bus groaned up the street behind me and the sky threatened to spit rain or an early snow, and my hands turned white from the cold. Nothing. I heard nothing. Just the bus. Failure thrumming in my ears. So I asked again, "Please, Lord, I need your help. I am lost. My life is broken. Nothing works. Can you hear me? Nothing I try is working." And again I heard no reply, only the farting of hydraulics as the bus receded down the street. I didn't stay there much longer. It was too cold. I opened my eyes, lifted my hands from the door, and plunged my fists in the pockets of my coat to warm them up. I turned and walked away. That's where this testament begins. If you failed all the way up to the heavens, like I did that day, after failing in every possible way here on earth, then truth is the only medicine that you will tolerate, because the truth is what you need. Let's start right here. I am 41 years old, of sound enough mind, though its habits have grown soft and its defenses weak from too much time spent traveling on what they used to call, remember, the information superhighway. Whether on my laptop with its glowing piece of violated fruit on the lid, or the awful little slab I've made the mistake of entrusting with my phone calls, and more, my higher faculties. Plato's slab. It is the last metaphor. I can't stop touching my phone for another hit of dopamine, another fall into its time-erasing abyss. The other night, while my phone lay coldly beside my pillow, I dreamed about it. I did. The slab is always sending and receiving. I've had to stash its body deep in a utility drawer just so I could get this far. When my service contract is finally up, I'm going to drop my iPhone into an empty coffee can, fill it with wet concrete mix, let this coffin dry, then carry it to the nearest Genius bar and see what they can do with it. For too long I have been peering into screens for messages and clues while my life went virtual on me. I don't have any time for more distractions. GPS, well, it can help me find the nearest supermarket with a Coinstar machine, cannot guide me on the path to another life, cannot show me how to shrug off all the failures and repay all the debts that have brought me here. I will have to do it myself, using older technology I find more reliable, simpler tools. I have something I want. I have someone I want. Actually, there's more to it. A child's bedroom that is empty on too many nights. An engagement ring I've been visiting in the boutique where it's for sale and asking the shop girls in plaid flannel to take out for me. I have a notebook in my lap, the kind you steal from the office or buy in bulk from Staples, with a red left-hand margin, sea blue lines, and cardboard backing. As soon as this notebook is filled, I will get another from the closet. There are plenty. I have all the pens in the house I could possibly use. Over the pages that will follow, and the time they will record, I can declare my regimental losses over and start again. I can settle into a new life that is already here and waiting. I can make my peace, even if it's sad and a little bitter, with an undoing so complete it's hard not to step back and admire the symmetry of it. Someone else might call it the return of the repressed, or diagnose me with a case of unconscious repetition. But I see other hands at work, the evidence of an artist, the fingerprints of a master who works in mirror images. How else can you explain waking up in a life that has come to resemble its earliest beginnings? That's what life wants, symmetry. Or I can just give up, go on screen staring, hit refresh over and over. I can stop this notebook right where I am, file it in a box with all the others I have abandoned, and go on losing. Let's start with a little inventory. At the top, my unpaid bills. So that's how the book opens. And those are literally the first pages of the book I wrote. And I actually started writing them right after I went to the church door and put my hands on it and asked whoever he is or what it is for help. So the truth is I didn't really know I was writing a book. I was just trying to figure out what had happened to my life. And how was it that I had wandered so far from where I meant to be. And so I had these notebooks that I would take into my son's bedroom on the days that he wasn't with me. And I would sit on his bed with just a pen. The phone was stashed away in its drawer. And I would get up sometimes as early as 4:30, sometimes 5. I would just start my day spending 4 hours writing. And then I would go onto the online job boards, and then waste 3 hours applying for stuff on Monster.com. I don't know, it's ridiculous jobs I never got anyway. So that's how the book started, and for about 3 or 4 months I was doing this, and then I typed some of the pages up and read them, printed them out, and read them over again, and I thought, well, this might actually be something. So I started thinking about how I might turn what was happening in my life into a book. And the funny thing was, this is the first time it's ever happened to me as a writer. I was literally writing about things in real time. One of the storylines in the book is I've moved in with my girlfriend. And just as things are really cratering, my financial life is cratering. So she gets freaked out, and I keep on thinking, oh my God, she's gonna ask me to leave. This is horrible. So I didn't know whether we were going to stay together, whether she was going to leave. I didn't know whether I actually had a book on my hands. I didn't know how. I was trying to work out a different custody arrangement with my son. I didn't know how that was going to work out. So I was literally writing about these things as they're playing out. And I kind of knew at the end of the book that I'd be at a place, but I didn't know what that place was. So I was literally kind of discovering what's happening to me, the character, as it was happening, which was pretty interesting. I wouldn't do it again, but it was pretty interesting. So the title comes, Too Good to Be True, comes from pretty much one of my first memories. When I was very young, my parents divorced when I was 3, and my mother was severely depressed when my parents were divorcing. Her father had committed suicide, and which had thrown her into a tailspin. And when my parents were splitting up, my mother was hospitalized a couple of times for depression. It didn't really work. So she started this experimental treatment with a bunch of hippie Gestalt therapists. This was 1972. And she spent a summer doing group therapy. And for part of the summer, we were there with her. In therapy, while my mother was doing group therapy, we were doing more individual therapy. So my older brother, who was 7 at this point, and my twin sister and I, who were 3, were in therapy. And this is where the title comes from. There's a memory I have, the earliest on the playlist, that's determined who I am. It's always had a special power over me, even if I've never understood why that is, or what the memory means. When I was younger, still a child, and much closer to the time when it takes place, the memory, as incomplete as it was, used to bring on a numb, abstracted feeling that would almost paralyze me. The fear that I wasn't in control of my own life, my own destiny. I would lie awake in the middle of the night and replay the memory in my head until I felt connected to a pain so deep and old and mysterious, and not of my own making, that I couldn't begin to name it aloud, let alone chase it away. Later, as I got older, I learned to disarm the memory of its power by telling it aloud to the amazement of friends. Tease it out long or slow, depending on my audience. Use their laughter as a kind of Novocaine. It begins with a glimpse of my family intact. My first family, the original one. Before my parents went off to find themselves in other lives, settled down with the second parents I have known for decades now. It's the one memory I have of all of us living together under the same roof. My mother, my father, my brother, my twin sister, me. My mother is lying on the couch. There is something wrong with her, but I don't know what it is. She doesn't want to get up. She doesn't want to move. She doesn't want to do anything. My father is on the phone with her doctor in the kitchen. They are hollering back and forth to each other between the rooms. The doctor wants her to go to the hospital, but she doesn't want to go. I don't want her to go, but she has to. My father yells, "You don't have any choice." I can see the sunlight in this memory. I can see my father standing in the kitchen, holding the black receiver to his ear, and I can see my mother lying on the couch. But that's all. The memory stops. Next, we are together, without my father, at a place that is like a hospital, but not a hospital. It has a name, Freedom to Be. There is a big, wide parking lot with traffic cones where we sometimes play. There are buildings with tall staircases that we like to climb. Trees and grass and hedges and stone walls. It is summertime, and the days are hot. We sleep and eat together in one building, big group meals where everyone has a different job. My brother, sister, and I pitch in and help. Most of the adults don't pay attention to us and stay in little groups instead, tapping cigarettes on the table before they light them. I have a favorite adult who always talks to me. His name is Jimmy Stone. In my memory, Jimmy Stone is younger than the rest of the adults. He is almost one of us. He wears a white t-shirt every day and a baggy pair of chinos, a beat-up pair of tennis sneakers. He lifts me high in the air when he sees me in the place we have dinner, and then I laugh when I say his name out loud. His name is funny. There is something wrong with Jimmy Stone, just like there is something wrong with my mother, but it doesn't bother me. He's my friend. That's what he says. Friends, right? Friends, I say. Good, he tells me. I need one. In the day, and sometimes at night too, our mother is away in group. When she's in group, there is always someone to take care of us. A few of them are staff, which is special. They ask a lot of questions. They watch us playing with one another. They ask us to draw things and use building blocks. They tell us to move the blocks between different boxes and to keep them organized. My brother hates doing any of the things they ask and argues with the adults a lot, so they usually end up taking him off by himself for long talks. My sister and I are better at doing what we're told when our mother is away in group, although sometimes she misses our mother and she cries. I try to make her feel better. She is my twin sister. I know her face even better than my own. I try. One day, while our mother is in group, they bring us to the room where they watch us playing and sit us down. I have no memory of what they say to us. But for each of us they have a sign. My brother's sign says, Mr. Know-It-All. My sister's sign says, Crybaby. And mine says, Too Good to Be True. The signs are hand-lettered on white cardboard. They punch holes in the corners and tie a piece of string to each so we can wear the signs around our necks. That is our job, to wear the signs. We do what we're told and put them on. We go outside. I have a vague memory of playing under a tree with my sister, and I don't like her sign. Not one bit. I tell her that she's not a crybaby, and she doesn't have to worry. At lunch, Jimmy Stone gets upset when he sees me at the table wearing my Too Good to Be True sign. He won't look anyone in the eye, including me. He doesn't talk. I eat in silence, too. After we're done and the adults are smoking cigarettes over in the lounge, I can see him talking with the staff person who makes us wear the signs. He is trying to keep his cool. He points in my direction and turns an incredible shade of red. Jimmy Stone. My friend, Jimmy Stone. The staff person puts a hand on Jimmy Stone's shoulder to try to calm him down. He rips himself away and goes over to a corner where he smokes a cigarette on the couch and keeps on punching the cushions. It's the last image I have of him in my mind, and I'm not sure if it's real or if I dreamed it up. I go out into the sunlight in the grass again, still wearing my Too Good to Be True sign. I wear it for the rest of the day, and I don't cry. My twin sister and I are 3. My brother is 7. We are far away from home. We miss our father. Sometimes we get scared. There is something wrong with our mother that has brought us to this place, but we don't know what it's called. So, the book kind of moves forward in time, which is the story of how the protagonist, kind of figures his way out of this this impasse in life he finds himself in, and then it moves backwards in time up to that memory. So, I should have given you a spoiler alert first. But one of the things that I kind of admit or discover in the book was that as kind of unethical and just as bad as that early childhood therapy was, they were totally right about the 3 of us. And so and so one of the things I sort of explore in the book was, well, maybe pretending that I'm too good to be true, maybe this is part of how I found myself in this place in life. Maybe my inability to sort of see things as they are, or say what I really feel, or act kind of the way I want to, as opposed to the way I should, is part of what led to all these things that I thought I had achieved sort of falling away. So the book then became a way to sort of dispel this whole idea of too good to be true, of being too good to be true. Let me take a drink of water real quick. So this is the part of the book that's been kind of controversial. My ex-wife, she started seeing somebody else, and it turned out that it was a writer who I knew, and it kind of happened at the night of this big book award, which he was nominated for. So in the book, I don't refer to him by name, but I call him the nominee. So it's funny. Dwight Garner in the Times said I shouldn't have included this letter to the nominee. Of course, the nominee and my ex-wife agree, but a lot of people feel like it's kind of like the heart of the book. And I sort of feel the same way. Like I think if you rip this out of the book, then there's no sort of narrative. Like, me, the protagonist, I'm not building to any kind of any kind of realization that, like, I'm going to do the opposite of being too good to be true. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I feel. So I've never done this before. I'm gonna read a little bit of the nominee letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read a little bit of it. For a while, there was lots of speculation about who the nominee was. People were like, on Goodreads and stuff, they were like, "Who's the nominee?" But he was outed. There's different sort of blogs that discuss this whole thing. I thought I would leave just enough details in there. Of course, I had to. When you're writing about real people, you have to be very careful. So I had to. I mean, both for ethical reasons, but also for legal reasons. But I thought I would try to be more playful than just being too good to be true. So I had a media attorney read it, and it's like, well, you have to change these characteristics. You can't make it too easy to figure out who he is. And I thought you also can't make it too hard. So I did leave in a few things to make sure that people would figure it out. So this is called Not This Guy. Dear nominee, there is no word for what we are. I have been trying to find the right language to describe us for a long time. Are we ex-friends? Were you my rival? Am I the mid-list cuckold, and are you the experimentalist who stole my wife? But none of it really satisfies. At least that's how I feel about it. We can't be ex-friends because we never were friends. Not really. We have friends in common, even good ones, but let's be honest, we've never had that much of anything to say to each other. Starting at the book party where we met, my book party, where your smugness seemed so weird and inappropriate. It was at a gallery in Chelsea. The room was full of writers, agents, editors, a few artists. I had never heard of you. We were introduced by the agent who had brought you that night in the middle of the crowd. Well, you seemed to say as we shook hands, what are you doing here? I shrugged it off as just another bad encounter in the literary world, and I didn't think about it again, or even remember our first meeting until a few years later, when I realized that you were fucking my wife. Sorry, I have to say, it was just so fun writing this. Maybe I shouldn't have put it in the book, but it was really fun. So rivals might be getting warmer. It's certainly in the ballpark. Not that I ever considered you my adversary until it was much too late. Looking back now with the benefit of being broke, I can recall a few more times when I sensed the simian need in you to grab at my banana and scurry with your stolen fruit into the treetops. Do you remember when you introduced me at that reading and sneered that I was a suburban novelist? That was the second time you pissed on my pant leg for no reason. But I have never been much for jungle politics. I can see now what a mistake that has been. Thinking that I was above the fight for territory, or that I somehow didn't need to protect what was mine. Yes, I was a cuckold. And yes, you took my wife when you didn't win a prize. Still, that doesn't capture it. You are my son's stepfather, or at least something like it. His anti-narrative dad. Because of the custody agreement that I never should have signed, that makes me a bystander in my son's life. And only did sign under duress, so I could be free from all the drama you and Marina created with your insanity. You see my son more than I do. How's that for justice? You listen to his stories about his days at preschool. You watch him polish off another bowl of pasta night after night. You read to him from the crappy Hot Wheels books he picks out from the catalog they slip into his backpack. That's why his bedroom here is empty. Again. That's why I'm sitting here on his candy-striped sheets, next to the penguin humidifier, writing to you. You've had your say in my life. You are here now. You bullied your way in without an invitation, at least not from me, and you've never, not once, apologized. Now I get my say. My trip to the winner's podium. That's right. I am taking my prize. This letter has been a long time coming. I hadn't planned on writing to you directly, or writing about you at all, to be honest, beyond dropping the nickname you so richly earned. But I went online the other night to remind myself of what it felt like back when I was in Maryland. I had this teaching job down in Maryland. With the geese. The geese were just like constant. As I read in the book, is the only time in my whole life I've actually sympathized with the hunter instead of the animal. It's just like, these geese, they won't shut up. Let me start again. But I went online the other night to remind myself of what it felt like back when I was in Maryland with the geese, and you were climbing the stairs to my apartment with my wife. You know, the apartment you moved into on the same day I moved out. Remember? I saw you carrying in your boxes of books and tubs of Grecian formula with my U-Haul truck parked across the street. You knew that I was there. You knew that I was across the street. Funny how you couldn't turn to face me as you shifted on my doorstep. When Marina put your box down and came running, trying to undo what I just witnessed, trying to wash away the reality of it with her tears, you slipped quietly inside the front door and didn't reappear. Soon after that, you posed for a publicity photo in my old bedroom. You know the one. You're standing by the window barefoot, in a t-shirt and jeans. Books everywhere. It's a nice picture. The light is flattering. I used to wonder what you were thinking then, what it felt like to just step into someone else's life. To wake up in someone else's bed, with someone else's wife beside you. Lying in a furrow in the mattress that you don't quite fill. I didn't check the date of the publicity shot, and I don't feel like doing it now. But I do know that Marina and I were still married when you posed for that picture. It was strange. I had a wife who was living with someone else while she was pregnant with a baby who belonged to me. Try that sometime. And a marriage binding me to the whole unruly mess that I would have to sue my way out of if I wanted to be free. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think that any of it was possible. I didn't know that it could happen, period, let alone that it could happen to me. So what did you do? How did you make amends? Did you tread softly through the rooms of the apartment? Did you duck from the windows and sit gently in my furniture? No. You posed for pictures. That's what makes you the nominee. I'd forgotten about that portrait in your bare feet. Sunlight streaming in through the same windows that I used to look out from to check my car on alternate side parking days. But I'm glad I found it again. It helps me remember what those days felt like, and why it's taken me so long to get my bearings again, to stop looking over my shoulder for what might be lurking behind, to stop checking the bolt on the front door for any signs that someone has been trying to get inside, for signs of attempted larceny. There are other pictures too. One in particular, you know the one, I'm sure you do, can still bring on a rage years later. The photo on the publishing gossip website from the holiday party that I skipped. Marina and you had just walked in. You had decided for some reason to bring my son to the holiday party with you. You had him tucked underneath your arm. He was 5 weeks old, maybe 6. He was dressed in a brown velour onesie. I repeat, you were carrying him. Is it any wonder that the blog identified him as your baby? Think about that. Your baby. I suppose I should admire you both for the sheer nerve that it took to bring him to a publishing party and show him off. Marina is smiling goofily for the camera. You look smug and shiny with your recent nomination. Primo, this is the nickname I use for my son, is bawling, as only an infant can do. His face is twisted with a howl of baby righteousness. He never cried much, not even at that age. But having his picture taken with you and Marina at the holiday party made him cry. I loved him for that. It was the only thing that made the picture bearable. He was calling out to me from under your armpit. Daddy, he was wailing. I want my daddy, not this guy. I'm going to stop there. That was fun. I've never read that. I hope you don't feel sullied anyway. Do people have questions I can answer?
This is a memoir about your life, so how do you feel about other people reading, the kind of struggles that you went through? I mean, I feel like you make it so vulnerable, like your whole life is out there, everything from divorce to troubles with your career? How do you get over that
Um,
and put it out there for people?
yeah, it's it's a tough thing. I'm sure any of you have either kind of put personal things in fiction or poems that you've written. You don't have to have written memoir to sort of feel this way. I knew what I was getting into. There were a lot of things to juggle. It's one of the reasons why this is going to be the only memoir I ever write. There are a lot of things to juggle: legal issues, ethical and moral issues. I showed the book to everybody who's in it, and there's a lot of sort of literary world and publishing stuff in here. And one of the sort of weird facts of publishing is it's just like it's a village, And so once I figured out that I had a book, and I showed it to my agent, and he liked it. We did some work on it, and then it went out to publishers. Some of the people, I guess, in the publishing houses who got it knew my ex-wife and the nominee. So like they had a copy of the book even before, like they just got it. They just got a copy of the book. Someone's like, "Hey, somebody wrote a book about you." Like, send it to them. So I was going to show the book to them at a certain point, but they found out about it like almost immediately, and so then I had to deal with all the fallout of that. So I would say that the hardest thing was dealing with family members. Making sure my parents were okay with the book, making sure my brother and my sister were, and then dealing with all the people who were in it to make sure that they're as comfortable as they're going to be with it. That always seemed much more important to me than sort of whatever self-exposure I risked, because it was my choice and it's my life, and it hasn't always been fun. But the biggest thing, and I think it's the reason why I wrote it in the first place, is like I was trapped in this point in life where I felt like I just couldn't figure out what to do. Everything that I had learned about kind of how to live my life as a writer and a person just wasn't working anymore. And the moment that I started writing about it, the moment that I became a character in a book instead of just me and my life, all of a sudden it felt like it was actually surmountable. I was not me waking up every morning wondering like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Or dealing with all these collection calls and stuff. I was a character in a book, and then all of a sudden it seemed like sort of livable.
So do you think that having taken a turn at purging in a true way, that that it's changed the way your fiction kind of processes through your body now? I guess I'm asking because I think a lot of the graduate students go back and forth between, am I going to tell this story as a memoir, am I going to tell it as a novel, or a memoir of a faction, or a memlish, or whatever. So I'm just curious whether something was purged or changed by absolutely writing a nonfiction, having a sort of a nonfiction center to your fiction career.
Well, some things did change in just the sense that because I kind of had nothing to lose, and because I had just decided that I'm just gonna like let it rip and not worry about second guessing myself or trying to modulate what I'm writing or fictionalize it. I think because I had decided that I was just going to put it all out there, it's made not putting it all out there feel false. But of course, there are different ways to put it out there. I mean, I am writing fiction now. I'm writing about made-up people who have no basis in anybody who I know. But I'm much more comfortable dealing now with them as characters and sort of the fullness of their faults, I guess, which is a really important thing if you're a writer. Like we want to, it's funny. There's people who believe in moral fiction and protagonists have to be sort of likable and all that, but I've never believed that. I feel like most people want to read about characters in the fullness of their faults. They want to see what's kind of wonderful about them and what's awful about them, because that's how we all feel about ourselves. I'm wonderful, and like, why do I keep hunting?
I have some questions about the signs, the whole memoir.
Sure, sure.
So you read when you were 3? You could read the signs?
It was,
Like, how do you remember them, as words or as someone saying them out loud?
I don't think I could read at 3, but I remember them as, I'm going to remember the signs themselves, and then remember them as these sort of phrases. And then, the whole time we were growing up, my brother and my sister and I, we would just, every now and then we'd just like, God, do you remember that? Like, that was pretty weird.
So your older brother probably could read and could tell. I'm just wondering, did the adults walk around and say, "Oh, too good to be true," so you heard it because it became such a phrase for you? Because I can imagine you could write anything on a kid who's 3; they would be like, "Whatever, there's a piece of paper on."
Right.
You know what I mean? It would have to be reinforced.
No, but it was part of the whole Gestalt method that they were doing, and they were trying to sort of break down all our defenses. But they were the phrases, whether or not my sister and I could read them, like they were spoken aloud and reinforced. And do you know what it means to be too good to be true? Like all that kind of stuff.
Like, what could that mean to a
I don't know. You'd have to be a hippie Gestalt therapist to figure it out.
How long did you have to wear it?
Just for part of the day.
You mean for more than one day?
No. I think it was just one day. Just one day.
Bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they were right. They were watching us very carefully, and they kind of knew exactly who we were. My sister still cries at the drop of a hat. It's crazy. Every time she does, I'm like, "Oh, cry, baby." And my older brother is a total Mr. Know-It-All. He just does not shut up. He's just so.
This is a fiction question.
Sure.
Last semester we had Anthony Johnson come here,
Mm-hmm.
and he had written an article titled "Don't Write What You Know,"
Mm-hmm.
and in it he expresses this concern of young writers who are writing from their own experience, and inevitably you end up with work that is beholden to and eclipsed by the source material.
Right.
I just started reading Under Cheever's Diary,
Mm-hmm.
which is I'm really liking it.
Good. Thank you.
But there are these comments that the narrator has about the parents, about the mother's 60s politics, and I'm just wondering, do you find yourself struggling with autobiographical elements in your fiction writing, and do you find that you're sort of constructing meaning out of your experience through your fiction?
I got very frustrated with there were certainly autobiographical elements to An Underachiever's Diary, but the family is wholly invented. They're actually in a typical way that we do as writers. I put them in like the nicer neighborhood than the one I grew up in, and gave them sort of the more ideal life, sort of the childhood that I wanted, instead of the one I had. So I did do quite a lot. I mean, they weren't my parents by any stretch of the imagination, and it wasn't my family. But I still put quite a bit of my family life in there. So I felt like I was doing a lot of work to fictionalize it, but then it was frustrating to me that, reviewers talked about it as if it were an autobiographical novel, and when I did interviews, that's all we talked about. And so I said, in my next book, there's going to be no one in this book who I can be mistaken with. And so I wrote a novel called The Faithful Narrative of a Pastor's Disappearance, which is about a church community outside of Boston. And I grew up in a completely, agnostic/atheist household. We didn't go to church at all. I think we had a Bible in the house, but nobody ever pulled it down. So I had to research everything about what it meant to be a churchgoer, how you structured a congregational church, how a minister is educated, like all these things I had to research. And I think there are some things about the book that are successful, and some things about the book that are less successful. I wasn't that comfortable with scripture, and with just depicting characters who were believers. I'm much more comfortable with it now, but I was still learning my way. So I sort of wish I had taken more time with that book. But I did write it out of this sense of frustration, and there's not a single character in there who's anything like me. Does that answer your question? Not really, right?
No.
You know, I think even if you're writing something where the material circumstances of your characters and their lives is nothing like what your material circumstances are or were, your life will still find its way in. And sometimes we can write about ourselves even more kind of directly or even more ruthlessly when it's another character who's sort of the messenger or the symbol, you know. So I think writers are always writing about their lives.
I had a question. When you were talking about writing this book, you referred to yourself almost in the third person.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of writing a memoir, did you find that you had to sort of take yourself and distance yourself and speak as if you were a character? That is, this is not me. This is a character. This is a character. Because you refer to yourself as a character.
Yeah.
Because in order to write it, did you need to distance yourself from it? In that,
Yeah. Well, I think you have to. Otherwise it just gets too muddy. You know, you really have to think. You really have to think of yourself as a protagonist in the story that you're writing. I mean, granted, things that you're writing have to have happened. Like, you can't make them up.
No.
But it's, you know, it all starts with you know, Augustine's Confessions, which is sort of gives us this is where autobiographical writing, as we understand it, comes from. And you know, it's kind of the way he works in that book is, you know, he has a kind of narrator's voice, which is always usually when he's praying or praising God. And then he dips into scene where he goes from it's a different persona. He's a protagonist. He's a character. So you kind of have this. You constantly have to navigate the switch back and forth from your narrator's voice to you as the protagonist, as the character. And the narrator's voice is you. It's you writing from a kind of seat of understanding, or at least trying to understand.
Because listening to you, I tend to be on the fiction side. It
Mm-hmm.
almost sounds like it could have been a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can't be a fiction because it's your life.
Right.
But the voice that I hear, it allows me as a reader to feel like this is not just a man who's indulging in telling the story. I mean, there is actually a story to be told that
Mm-hmm.
has a broader relationship to its audience.
Right. Yeah.
As your
No. That's. I think that's really true, and this is, you know, one of the reasons why I get frustrated with memoir a lot, because I think the impulse is just to think, well, it happened to me, so it's significant, so I can write about it. But the truth is, you have to be ruthless about what you include and what you don't include, and you have to actually have a storyline. It's otherwise, you know, like if you just put your life between the two covers of a book, first of all, it would be like that big. But then it's just like you'd be drowning the reader in the muck of life. I mean, you have to be selective. So yeah, the big surprise for me in writing this was how much it felt like it was a novel.
Sort of going off that last question, it seems, and understandably so, that the most important thing in your life is your son, which seems to put you in a unique position as a writer, you know, sort of as a father writing a memoir. And I have to wonder, did you sort of write just unabashedly, put your heart on the page, or did you ever feel compelled to sort of filter it as the impression you want to give your son when he reads this, you know, 10 or 15 years from now, or something like that?
No, I wasn't trying to convince him of anything. I did have this realization. I was in mediation with my ex-wife, and she had read the manuscript, and had all these objections, these things she wanted me to change. And so we were sitting there literally like across the table from each other in the mediator's office. And this is a great thing I have to write about sometime. The mediator was also a shaman in Tribeca. My Tribeca shaman. And I kept on thinking, like, how come we're not in the underworld? I want to go to the underworld now. Why are we like? I want the shaman here. I don't want the mediator. Because this is the level that this is all taking place on, you know. But I was trying to explain to her why there were certain things that I wouldn't change. And I hadn't realized it until that moment when I was talking to her, when I said, well, you know, I just don't want him to ever question how much I love him. I just don't want, when my parents divorced, I still always had this, even though I knew a little bit about the circumstance of their divorce, I always felt like, well, my dad wanted to be by himself. He didn't want to be with us anymore. Like, part of me, I always just, even though he was a great dad, I just always had this suspicion. And so when I was sitting there in the mediator's office, it's like, I just don't want Isaac to ever have that suspicion. I just want him to know that I love him. And this is the part that's unfair. It's unfair to my ex-wife, but I want him to know that it wasn't my choice to not be in his life every day. That's not what I would have chosen. So there was a sense that, yes, I mean, I do, on some point in his life, my guess is he's actually never going to want to read the book. And part of me hopes that he never will, because he should be spared all this stuff. But I did realize that, yeah, on a certain level, there were things I was including just so he'd never have that question. I just didn't want him ever to have that doubt. Okay.
Tell us about your money problems and how writing about money has replaced writing about sex.
Yeah, I guess you just have to read the book. It's funny, it's just I'm old enough to have published my first novel when I was like 28 or 29 or something like that, and there wasn't internet. We had email addresses, but it wasn't such a big deal, and you didn't really hear from readers that much. Like if somebody came to a reading, they might say something, but there weren't like comment threads and message boards and all this stuff. It was still like a little bit mysterious. But now everybody just comments on everything, and a lot of it is kind of mean. I have to admit, I get a little kind of perverse pleasure out of that, but just seeing how awful, some of the stuff that I think, because I write about being broke, and partly because I'm a man, and partly because I'm a parent, some people read the book and they're just like, why don't you just get a job? What are you complaining about? Get a job! On Goodreads, somebody was actually hated the book so much they were like tweeting it as they were reading the book. They were just like, get a job! Page 105, get a job!
Are these men?
Women, actually. Men, yeah, I think there are some men online who do too. Actually, it was one of the fun things I did at Bennington, teaching the grad program there. And I thought it would be fun to do a PowerPoint presentation of all the nasty things that people had said. So I hadn't looked in like 4 months or something, and I went and I was kind of aghast at all the stuff that was out there. So I chose like 15 of the most choice comments. So I do think writing about being broke, it brings out the side of people where they're just like, loser, get a job. I mean, I think there's really there really is a kind of fundamental lack of compassion for not having money, for being broke. It's just like there's still the assumption is that it's your fault. And as I cop to in the book, I made some very stupid decisions. So like a lot of it was my own making. But then again, I was also came of age at a time when you borrowed money to go to school. And if, and those loans can get sold between companies, and before you know it, you can be 5 or 10 years down the road and you actually owe more money than you did at the beginning. And you're like, what happened? Or you can take a year off from paying your loans, like I did, and then realize like, oh my God, that's twice, I owe twice as much money now. So there are some kind of structural, or there's a moment when I'm talking about my bank and what they were doing at this point, which is like I had quote unquote overdraft protection, but that just meant every time I dipped into it, they would charge me $35. Didn't matter whether it was like a $2, a 99-cent iTunes charge, or my rent check. It was just like if they would extend me this line of credit and then charge me $35 every time I kind of went into it. So I think there are these kind of fundamentally sort of skewed ways of being in the world financially that we are now, that people don't really write about that much, that I did want to write about. I mean, everybody hates their bank, right? I would have such fantasies like, today's the day I'm going to throw the rock through the window. But then I thought, no, because there's security cameras everywhere and I will be arrested. But I just wanted to throw the rock through the window every time I walked by. We can do one quick question. Very quick. I'll answer quick.
Your book was the first book I read on a Kindle.
Uh-huh.
Because we got it on Amazon.
Right. It's cheap on Kindle.
Talk about how has it worked for you? Like the way the book was published, and how is it?
It was an experiment, which I knew there wasn't going to be in a lot of bookstores because they all hate Amazon so much. So and it wasn't in a lot of bookstores. So I've always liked books, printed books. I mean, I have a Kindle. I've read a couple books on it. I read Tender as the Night on my phone. It was the first book I ever read on my phone, and I was like, "What a great book! Why am I reading it on my phone?" So it was a trade-off. The book was not in a lot of bookstores, which was not great. But then again, it was I think it sold like 7 times more copies in ebook than it has as a hardcover, which is strange. But a lot of people read on devices now, so it's just something to. It was an experiment. I don't think I would do it with a novel, but with a memoir, it seemed fun to me. All right.
One last.
Sorry, I know you said that you weren't going to write a memoir again.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think you have to write a sequel to this. I am nosy enough to want to know what you're going to be doing in 2 years and how everybody is. And I just think there's a lot more to be said.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Of course, whenever a writer says I'm never going to do that, they end up doing it, 10 years down the road. So maybe I will. But I appreciate you wanting to know. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you all very much. This has been fun.